Gospel according to St. Mark. Listen now for what the Spirit is saying to the church. Jesus began to teach them that the Son of Man must undergo great suffering and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. Jesus said all this quite openly. And Peter took Jesus aside and began to rebuke him. But turning and looking at his disciples, Jesus rebuked Peter, saying, "Get behind me, Satan, for you are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things." Jesus then called the crowd with his disciples, and he said to them, "If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it. And for those who lose their life for my sake and for the sake of the gospel will save it. For what will it profit them to gain the whole world and forfeit their life? Indeed, what can they give in return for their life? Those who are ashamed of me and of my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of them the Son of Man will also be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
So this past week has just been an odd week. It is one of those weeks where I got all my appointments perfectly set up in my calendar. And I know where I need to be, what time I need to be, and I have it all planned out. And a Monday comes, and I take the car in, Karen's minivan, into the repair shop for an oil change. 5 hours later, not an oil change. And my schedule then just became, all Monday just it went to the wayside. It just went sideways in many ways. And that's pretty much, that was my week. Every day this week, there was something that just did not happen as I had planned, and as I had foreseen my life that week to be. Everything just got shifted and moved. There was good stuff and not so good stuff, but nevertheless, there was a part of me because, I'm pretty easygoing. But I am also very organized. I like to have my ducks in a row. I like to plan. I like to plan out things. But at the same time, be flexible for whatever happens. But even then, sometimes, like this past week, there's only so much flexibility I can do. So this morning, as we come into church, and Bob and Josie have been working on the sanctuary since it flooded after the big rain, and hope that it would get dried out and all that for worship. But if you go in there and you've got allergies like I do, boom! We still have some work in the sanctuary on cleaning up. But again, I think this is God just pushing me a little bit more. We got to flex. We got to adapt. We got to change, and we did. The community did. We jumped on it. We got set up in here. It's not perfect. There's just so many things that just are not just right, but it's okay because at the same time, God's here. God is with us. Wherever 2 or 3 are gathered in his name, Jesus is with us. Christ is with us. We're worshiping God. Are we worshiping God?
Yes.
Yeah, worshiping God. Doesn't matter. Wherever we're together, Christ is there. And if Christ is there, the church is there. And if the church is there, then we are in worship. Everything else is just extra. Flavoring, frosting on the cake. Yeah. And there'll be cupcakes later with frosting. So when I think of the gospel lesson this morning, and we're the disciples, the apostles, they're all heading towards Jerusalem. This is the last time, the third time, the last time that Jesus is going to go into Jerusalem for the Passover. And Jesus is now openly teaching about what is yet to come, what will happen when they get there. He is unfolding for them. He's preparing the disciples of what's going to happen. You know, everywhere in the Gospels, whenever something happens, Jesus says, keep it to yourself. Quiet. I healed you, but keep it to yourself. Now, Jesus is not keeping it to himself. And he's not even encouraging the disciples, the people that are overhearing, to keep it to themselves. He's saying, this is the schedule this week. We're going to go and eat some bread. We're going to have Passover, and then I'm going to get arrested, and then I'm going to be tried, I'm going to be killed, but then I will raise from the dead, just so you know. But the disciples, there's just something in their mind that's going, no, this is not how it's supposed to be. You are the Messiah. As Peter has said, he openly said, you are the Messiah. They've been saying you're the Son of God. People are investing an image, an idea of who Jesus is and will be. They have their life planned out based on their interactions with Jesus. They see the glory of Israel rising up, kicking the Romans up. King David's descendant, Jesus, will be on the throne, and all these 12 that are like his closest friends, his buddies, will become the minister of X and X and X. They foresee great power and authority rising up from the grassroots, and Jesus being in the center of it. They know where their life is going. They know exactly, they have already started thinking about that villa that they're going to retire to after Jesus retires as king. Or after they retire as the minister of finance in the case of Judas. Because he held the money bag. But Jesus is kind of dashing that to the ground already. I mean, he hasn't even entered Jerusalem. They haven't even called together potential troops. Jesus is already breaking down and dissolving these images of a future, of an identity that they have been dreaming up and seeing themselves as. And so Peter, we know Peter, quick to speak, quick to act. He put in, one of the three that goes up on the top of the mountain to see the transfiguration. So Peter knows who Jesus is. And Peter, because he feels that he's a close friend of Jesus, pulls him aside and rebukes him. Starts just giving it to him. What in the world are you talking about? And you're talking openly. You're telling everybody what's going to happen, that you're going to die. This is not going to happen. I've seen you transfigured. I've seen the power that is within you. This cannot happen. This will not be. You can't do this. Jesus, you can't do this. You cannot go and basically offer yourself up to die. Apparently Peter didn't hear that last part when Jesus openly told the disciples that he was going to be raised from the dead. Basically, Peter stopped listening when Jesus said that he was going to die. And probably Peter is channeling just that feeling in the room among everybody that has been walking with Jesus, that have given up so much for him to wander around and hand to mouth, being fed on donations, to hear that this one that you really love and adore is going to die. But what does Jesus say to Peter? He rebukes Peter. In some ways, I feel that it was probably a little bit more gentler than I probably read it. That Jesus is reminding Peter that Peter is not God. that Peter is not Jesus. That Peter has a focus on something other than what God has in plan. A plan that will save, liberate. And Peter is stuck. Peter is stuck in a particular identity, an identity that Jesus has come to break. Jesus has come to take the identity that these disciples, these apostles, these people are envisioning for themselves, come and take that identity and take it to the grave with him. That identity has to die in order for it to be resurrected, for transformation to happen, for new life, a new creation. And that's what Jesus tells the rest. I mean, after this one-on-one with Peter, who is named the Rock, who we all know that will eventually become one of the foundation stones for the church and the church going out to the ends of the world. Peter is turned to the side, trying to continue to think, and Jesus calls everybody that is there, everyone, to him and unfolds. And what does he say? Oh, it's good to actually go back to the gospel and let's hear this again. If any of you want to be my followers, if any of you see life in what I am teaching and doing, if any of you have seen the power and want to follow me, to follow in my way, to follow in my footsteps, to be my students, then you have to deny yourself and take up the cross and follow me. You have to think about all those things that you have grasped onto, that give you your particular identity, your politics, your economics, your sociology, all of those things that define you, and you have to take that to the grave through the cross. It has to be crucified with Jesus. You have to follow Jesus to the cross in this identity, these human things that we put so much value in, has to be crucified, died, buried, so that God can do what God's going to do, that God promised. So that you will then be raised into a new life, transformed, liberated as God envisions for you. And you will have a new name. Like Abram and Sarai got a new name from God. And that's what our baptism teaches, that every time we remember our baptism, we are remembering that again and again and again, we have to die in order to live. All the human things that we get so violently angry about, and will take each other down, that we will forget the humanity of another in order to get our way, that has to die on the cross so that we can truly be the people that God has envisioned. What are the things that you have latched onto, that you hold so dear, that is very human? That if you lose it, you lose something. What is it that you're going to lose? And then on the flip side of that, what is the other side of it? If you lose it, if it dies with Christ, how are you going to be liberated? It's kind of like this beautiful cross that we got up here that comes from a Greek Orthodox monastery. It actually has two sides to it. There is the death side. Very beautiful. But it is a Christ that is crucified.
surrounded by the symbols for the Gospels to remind us that the good word, the news from God is that in death we have life. And then the flip side is the victorious resurrected Jesus. Also, again, with the gospel and angels. That we are constantly, always dying and rising, dying and rising, dying and rising. But we have to be intentional about it. We have to constantly be following Jesus. We have to constantly be taking up the cross that is both death and life, in order for us to find life. And not just ourselves, but everybody, all humanity, all of creation. Because every time we die and rise, it is again and again a renewal of this world. It is again and again a way that God is breaking into this world and redeeming it for what is yet to come, when all things are reconciled to God. Those who are ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of them the Son of Man will also be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels. How are you? How are we together dying and rising? What do we need to give up? What do we need to take up? Where do we need to stand and rebuke? Where do we need to stand and give a hand? Where do we need to be the hands and feet of Christ in this world? What do we need to die to in order to be the hands and feet of Christ? It's Lent. This week, take some time, think about how are the ways that you need to die. And when we die, you will grieve. That's part of the process, the grieving. But out of that comes new life. What is it that you need to die to in order to live? All praise, honor, and glory be to you, O God.